Hello, I'm Karen Harrison. Welcome to Reiki Call podcast, January 2025. Hope you're staying warm in this weather. My website is karenharrison.net. And we're going to start with a little grounding meditation before I introduce our guest tonight, Jennifer Brodigan. So let's activate our Reiki energy. And let's just begin with the Reiki ideals. Just for today, we let go of anger. We let go of worry. We do our work honestly. We're grateful. And we're kind to others, beginning with ourselves. And now place your hands on your heart. And breathe in the light of Reiki into your heart. And exhale the light of Reiki into your aura. Again, breathe in the light of Reiki into your heart. Exhale the light of Reiki into your aura, filling your entire aura with the Reiki energy. And again, breathe in. Exhale, filling your aura. We are grateful to be gathered here today, to share with each other, to connect with Reiki, to spread information about how Reiki in hospitals works and how it can work in your local hospital and how you can volunteer there if you feel guided to do so. We're grateful for each of you and the love and light that you are and that you share in the world. And so it is. Blessed be. Amen. Excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat. So, all right, well, let me just tell you a little bit about my guest, Jennifer Brodigan. She is a friend and one of our licensed Reiki teachers with the International Center for Reiki Training. Her website is reikitheholygift.com. She's located in northern Idaho, having moved there recently from Oregon after working with Reiki for 12 years in Oregon. So she's trained in the Holy Fire Reiki all the way through Karuna Master. And she recently retired from a 32-year career. She started really young as a realtor and continues to teach Holy Fire Reiki World Peace classes in person and online from Post Falls, Idaho. So she has 3 grown children, grandmother to 10, great-grandmother. Are you serious?
Serious, yes.
Wow, to 4 more and 4 more great-grandchildren to come.
No, there's 4 now, more to come.
All right.
Grandchildren are in their 20s and starting families.
Wow. So she has a wonderful animal companion dog, Kootenai, a 7-year-old blue heeler Australian shepherd, brilliant and intuitive dog. And he is a Reiki master who brings in the healing power of the animal kingdom to assist during Reiki classes and during her Reiki sessions. And she loves nature and frequently is drawn to the forest to absorb the healing properties and give Reiki to the spirit of the earth. Thank you for that. And she looks forward to teaching her 11-year-old grandson to snowshoe this winter. And she also loves the plant kingdom and works with her plant garden and has an interest in herbalism and giving Reiki to her plants. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this story with everybody.
Yes.
Most
And
people in our lives, they're just not interested in things that we do with Reiki if they're not called to Reiki. So this is a really enjoyable opportunity and I appreciate it. And I appreciate you for all that you've done for us over the years of your Reiki journey that have opened the way to make it easier for us. Thank you.
oh, well, thank you. And you've also written an article or two about Reiki in hospitals for the Reiki News magazine, right?
I wrote one that was about the Reiki program, and then
Mhm.
there's been others about other items.
Okay. And where can people find those articles?
On my website, reikitheholygift.com, on the library page.
Okay, wonderful. So that'll be a good resource for after the session. So, um, you've started a Reiki in Hospitals program in Oregon. Did you have any medical training before you started the program?
None whatsoever.
Like you're not a nurse or a
Not a
CNA?
nurse, not any medical training, although about an hour ago I thought, oh, well, I guess I did take a CPR class and a first aid class about 40 some years ago. But that was it. No background in medical training whatsoever.
Wow. Well, what gave you the, bravery to do it and the inspiration?
God, plain and simple. It was not something I wanted to do. And it was the farthest thing from my imagination. I had never even considered it until I started getting this nudging. I don't know how else to describe it other than a nudging. And it always came from behind me and in a specific place in my house. And I dismissed it for a long time and kind of ignoring it like it's my imagination. No, that couldn't be. No, not me, huh? And but periodically that nudging would come back again. And to the point to where it became arguments with God. No, you can't make me. Here's all the reasons why I would not be good at it. I don't know anything about it. I cannot stand body goo. No, I won't
Body
do
goo.
it.
Oh,
And
you mean
then
like
that,
you see blood and you faint?
well, no, but more of gag.
Oh, well, maybe that's worse.
No, I mean, I was so bad that if I was watching TV and clicking through channels and some sort of surgery came up, I would start to gag and couldn't click fast enough to get through it. So, no way was I going to be willing to do something in a hospital. And
Hmm.
not only
Yeah.
that, at the time that this started, I couldn't fit one more thing into my life. I had been taking care of my grandmother the last 5 years of her life. I knew her life was coming to an end. I did not have healthy boundaries in regards to our codependent relationship, and I couldn't do it. But this would not have happened. The program would have not happened if it had been my idea. Because with my personality, if I set a goal to do something, I would have been calling too often, I would have been too persistent, I would have pushed too hard. But the way this unfolded was this gentle nudging from God to the point of arguments with time in between. I mean, this process took a good year before I finally said, okay. But there came a point to where I said okay, and I called the hospital and spoke with the volunteer coordinator, and she wanted nothing to do with it. Couldn't get me off the phone fast enough. Whew. See, God, they don't want me. And then the nudging would stop for a while, and then it would come back. I'd make the phone call. No, Whew. They didn't want me. And so this just kept going on. And then my grandmother's life ended, and That was in September of 2014. So it was earlier in 2014 when this process began. I started my Reiki journey in January of 2013, but I didn't do anything professionally because I was taking care of my grandmother.
Mhm.
And other than giving her Reiki and my dad and a few friends. So really new into Reiki when all of this came up on top of no medical background.
Wow.
And yeah,
And who knows?
you have no idea where Reiki can take you. You just put one foot in front of the other and miracles happen. And
Wow.
so then in January of 15, I started teaching and I was doing a community Reiki circle in person. And there came a point to where I started feeling like, well, this might happen. Even though the volunteer coordinator continued to say no, I started to talk to people that I met at my Reiki share. And one other surfaced that we had met in our Karuna class. And
Mhm.
just on the off chance it might come together. And then in about September or October of 2015, I made that obligatory call after some more nudging
A
and
third one?
pardon?
The third call?
No, no, no. There were
Oh, this
many
was,
calls. Yeah,
oh,
a couple of months in between. See, if
oh,
it had been my idea, 2 months would have not gone by. I would have put it in my calendar as a reminder to call every 2 weeks. I would have shut it down. But because it wasn't my will, it unfolded perfectly. So more than a year of this back and forth, I make the phone call fully expecting the same results of no, don't want anything to do with it. And then later on, I found out why she wanted nothing to do with it, but that's a different story. So I made this phone call and she answered and she said, there's somebody who wants to talk to you. He was the co-chair of the hospital's integrative therapies committee. And she gave me his number. I called him and he was super excited. As it turned out, the Integrative Therapies Committee had wanted to start a Reiki program at the hospital for about 2 years, but they didn't know who to call or how to start it.
oh,
From that call, things moved really rapidly. Okay, so that call was September or October of 2015.
mhm.
The program started January of 16. That's how quickly it came together.
Wow.
And so when I had that conversation with him, the co-chair of the Integrative Therapies Committee, just so happened that a few days later, the committee was meeting and I was invited to go and speak to them. And they were very receptive and super excited. And just immediately, they started working on the process for getting approval from the hospital administration to conduct a 3-month pilot program in the oncology department.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that's exciting. And how did you how did you know what to do? I mean, I'd be
Oh,
thinking,
I didn't know what to
uh,
do. Okay, so
okay, have
I
no
had
idea
no,
what to do. Now what? Help.
it was all very natural and organic. It felt, it just flowed. There was a lot of learning curve, of course, but I, even though I had no medical background, I had a lot of background and experience in recruiting volunteers, training volunteers, creating volunteer programs. So that was an asset. I also had experience in talking to people in group settings. And so it was comfortable going to the Integrative Therapies Committee and speaking with them. I didn't know the lingo, the dialect. I mean, they In the hospital setting, they have acronyms for everything. And most people have a whole lot of letters after their name of credentials and highly educated. And I don't have a formal education. My education has been life and self-education. And so after that first meeting with them, then we had some regular meetings as the process was unfolding for getting approval to start the program. And every hospital has a training program for volunteers. So of course I had to go through that program, and they do a background check and all sorts of things. And all of the Reiki team volunteers had to do that same process also.
Mhm.
And so we had all of the approval in place. Oh, and as this was unfolding, a knee replacement surgery that was scheduled for the following March got upped to that December before.
For your
So,
knee?
yes.
Ooh.
So some of the things that I did in preparation, because I wasn't comfortable in hospitals. I mean, that's just not a place that I ever enjoyed being, and had I needed the lay of the land. So I went and I visited the oncology department. I learned about their processes, how they function, what's expected. Well, part of it was the training in the hospital volunteer program, but I had to be there physically just to get a feel of it. So I knew how to train my volunteers as I was recruiting them. And I developed a program, just an easy training program for my volunteers that they needed to go through. But that was a very foreign environment to me. I'd only been in the hospital either as a patient or visiting somebody. And
Wow. Well, this is pretty amazing that you put all this together with, I mean, you overcame a lot of hurdles, including, like your probably your own self-doubt. And it's like, wow, can I really do this?
by that point, it was so clear that this really wasn't about me. I was just an instrument in the process,
Mm-hmm.
and that a lot of life experiences had prepared me for that setting and that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so about a week or so before the program started in January of 2016, there were two meetings scheduled for staff to learn about the program.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the word Reiki was a foreign word. People just were not familiar with Reiki. And so it was real important to go and meet with staff from the oncology department and give them an idea of how we were going to function, which days of the week we would be there, what hours we would be there, talk to them about how Reiki worked. And so I'm 5 weeks out of a total knee replacement. And I show up to this meeting thinking, oh, there's going to be a few people there to the first one. And because when I went to the oncology department, excuse me, I didn't see that many staff members. But when I walked into the room, it was a small classroom, long and narrow, and long, skinny tables lined up all the way back. It was standing room only.
Wow.
And so I hobble up to the front of the room and I start talking, and it was just really comfortable. It was very easy to talk to them and explain what was going to occur, how we were going to do it, a little bit about Reiki. Um, it was so comfortable that when my knee started throbbing too much, I explained that I needed to sit down, but I was so comfortable. I flopped my leg up on a table and didn't realize for several minutes how I must have looked sprawled eagle with my leg elevated, but they were all medical people, they were nurses. And they understood that you need to elevate because swelling
Oh,
occurs.
wow.
And there was a lot of questions and answers and dialogue, conversations going on. And then something had happened that I had not anticipated. And one of the participants asked if I could give a demonstration.
Yeah.
I had not thought about that at all. And this was a room filled with people I had never met, knew nothing about. I didn't hesitate. This was beyond me. I just got up, moved my chair in the little walkway in between the tables, took a few deep breaths, closed my eyes, and facilitated a healing experience. I don't know what I said. I didn't know what I said afterwards. For me to be able to facilitate a guided meditation, a Reiki healing experience, I need my eyes closed so that I can go to that higher place of consciousness. But there were times during this where I was wondering if I was the only person with my eyes closed. But I didn't dare open my eyes and risk breaking that connection that was providing the language that everybody was hearing. So it came to a close. I guided everybody to slowly open their eyes. I opened my eyes and nobody opened their eyes, which felt like a really long time. And it worked. And the first people to open their eyes were the co-chairs of the Integrative Therapy Committee, who were standing at the very back of the room. And they opened their eyes, looked at each other, and turned to look at me with these huge ear-to-ear Cheshire cat grins on their face. And then people started opening their eyes and questions, all sorts of questions. Could you do that for my patients? And I don't remember all the questions, but that was the most repeated question. How would this affect the patients? And finished the conversation. Everybody was really excited. And then there was another meeting scheduled at a different time and date so that other staff members could come.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a smaller group. There were about 18 in that group. But now I had a little experience. So I planned a healing experience, and
Uh-huh.
we were sitting at tables that made a square.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I facilitated the healing experience, I went around the room, placing my hands on their shoulders for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Leading up to that, there was one person there who was really negative, just had nothing but negative things, negative questions, just really thought it was a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. But after the healing experience, he was the one most enamored. He was the one most excited. Because as you know, Reiki is difficult to define and describe. It's experiential. We need to experience it
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have some sort of understanding of what is available.
Mm-hmm.
And then after those wonderful experiences of those meetings, I was expecting to be openly welcomed into the oncology department. But the first day, and for quite some time, and I didn't always have another volunteer with me. It just depended on circumstances. But when we first arrived, well, people weren't interested. The staff wasn't interested. They didn't know how to introduce Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
That was a learning curve on my part. The way we first started the program was that we were required to have the nurses offer Reiki to patients. And I had coached nurses on how to introduce it. I had even written 2-sentence explanation
Mhm.
Practice role modeling it with nurses before they walked into the patient's room. And I would hear things like, it's something like yoga. How did they get that out of what we just practiced?
Hmm.
So it would have taken a long, long time to get things going if it wasn't for one nurse. He had been a nurse for 20 some years. In the 70s, he had received Reiki and he wanted his patients to receive Reiki. So thanks to him, we were able to demonstrate the benefits to patients because he made sure that all of his patients received Reiki. And then other nurses noticed the difference
And
because his
what
patient,
difference did they notice?
well, it made it easier for them because people who are fighting for their life are anxious, they're scared, they're sick, they're going through treatments that just are horrific, and they are constantly calling on their nurses. Well, once a patient's had a Reiki session, we leave them asleep. And it makes the nurses' jobs easier because those patients are calm and relaxed.
Mhm.
And then also to help the nurses have a better understanding of the benefits, we would offer Reiki to them, which was difficult for a lot of them um, because they felt it was not their place to take care of themselves and they had too much to do anyway. But the charge nurse was very supportive. So she encouraged her staff to take, even if it's 5, 7 minutes, to go off into a little conference room big enough for 3 people, two Reiki practitioners and a staff member, and receive a little bit of Reiki. That helped move things forward.
Mhm. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, in giving Reiki to a person in the hospital, I mean, obviously you don't have a massage table like I've got sitting back over there. So, you know, what kind of positions are you doing? Trying to reach around all the tubes and cords and the hospital beds and, you know, people all wired up and like, oh my God.
Beeping sounds and
Yeah. I'm like, what if you bumped the IV and pulled it out or something like that? Hopefully that never happened.
no, it didn't. But there's the railings on the beds. And
Mm,
so it is cumbersome to reach. And the easiest way, but didn't always work out this way,
mhm,
would be that they'd be either laying or elevated, have their head elevated, and
mm,
to start with a hand on the head and a hand on the heart.
mhm,
And that was most of the time I started that way. There were times when there was just too much equipment in the room to be able to get next to the bed, and I'd sit at their feet.
mhm,
There were many times when the patient didn't want to receive Reiki, but it was their loved ones and the nursing staff that wanted them to receive Reiki because the patient was cranky and crabby and upset and making everybody miserable. And so in those types of situations, I would sit next to them. For of course, I'd go in and offer Reiki to them, and they'd say, "No, I don't want it." And their spouse or loved ones that were there, "Please, please, please." Well, the patient said no, I honor that. But I pull a chair up next to them and then just chat with them a little bit. Do you mind if we just sit and talk for a while? And as we were talking, I would put a hand on their leg and Reiki would just flow really fast and furious. And I'd chat with them about things that they like to do. Like, some of the questions I might ask, and I use this a lot, was, do you like to go to the mountains or do you like to go to the beach? And I didn't know that what I was actually doing was a healing experience, a verbal healing experience in talking to them about what they liked about the beach. And then I would describe things about being at the beach and the sound and the smell and the different scenery at
Mm-hmm.
the beach or in the mountains. And then they would fall asleep. And it, as soon as Reiki started flowing, spouses relax, the caregivers relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Because their loved one was relaxed and then they could relax.
Mhm. And we did offer Reiki to anybody that was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the caregiver part of the spouse, the couple,
Mm-hmm.
would say no, no, because they wanted their loved one to receive every minute of Reiki that they could receive.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as Reiki started flowing, then the loved one, who is most of the time sitting in a reclining chair that would be near the bed, they would fall asleep and just their head would drop down so heavy onto their chest that I would monitor them to make sure that, wow, if they're not getting enough oxygen, are they going to pass out?
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Wow.
so fascinating giving couples in that setting Reiki, in that connection, that energetic connection that they have.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rewarding to watch how that dynamic plays out.
Wow. Well, that sounds very cool. What about hand positions? Did you instruct your volunteers in what hand positions to use and what hand positions not to use, and whether or not to draw the symbols in the hospital or not?
That was part of the Reiki specific training, was not to let anybody see you drawing any symbols. They're sacred. We honor that sacredness by keeping them secret. We also did not want anyone seeing us drawing any symbols and having it look like some sort of woo-woo witchy thing. Don't know how else to say it. That we were in a medical, scientific setting. We needed to be very, very professional.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not do traditional hand placements.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not practical. It's far too difficult to reach over a bed.
Yeah.
And I coached them repeatedly about finding positions that you could be comfortable in, keeping your body comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I would pull a chair up and straddle my legs as far as I could so I could get as close as I could. But it was quite easy to have a hand on the head and a hand on the heart because these were these were time periods of 2 to 4 o'clock. So frequently people are already sitting up in their beds. And that was easy. And it was easy to move around arms and move down legs, go to feet. And there's many opportunities to be able to give Reiki when nurses were having trouble inserting an IV.
Oh, yes. Now I remember I've told a story about this before where I accompanied my mother to some surgery where she was very nervous about getting the IV. And I just started sending Reiki with my eyes to her and to the nurse who was working on the IV while another nurse was taking her history. And after a little while, my mother looked over and said, "Oh, there's an IV in my hand." So what are your stories?
Oh, where do I start? There were some nurses that quickly picked up on that. You know, some people it's just difficult to get a good vein, or their veins have been poked so much that they're damaged. And so the word got around that Reiki made it easier. So on days when Reiki volunteers were there, then some of the nurses would ask if they knew they were going to have help, need help. And then it was a good distraction for the patient. I'll speak for myself and the way I interacted with the patient. I'd be on the opposite side of the bed of the arm that was going to be poked, or the hand, or the foot. And I would have them looking at me, and I was talking to them as would hold their hand or put a hand on their shoulder. And just part of it, the distraction, in addition to the Reiki, relaxed them. And then the needle would go in real easily. Did a lot of that in the surgical unit too. But we'll save surgical unit stories for after some more of the Reiki stories, oncology stories, if you don't mind.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's pretty amazing. So the nurses started seeing more of the benefit of it and being open to it. I mean, how many volunteers did you train and how many people were giving sessions?
So there were never more than 2 practitioners at a time, and frequently I'd be alone. So that's part of a volunteer program, is a challenge, is finding volunteers who truly are committed. I started the program with 4 other practitioners, and they were very reliable, but they also got burned out after a while. But more people surfaced, and that was a learning curve for me, in that just because someone is experienced in Reiki and they say they would be committed, I would ask for a year commitment with just two-hour shifts a month, and which, that's doable.
Mhm.
And then I discovered that they really didn't come to me with a pure heart to serve others, that they really were coming from a place of wanting to be able to tell others that they're working at the hospital and giving Reiki at the hospital.
Hmm.
Yes, so that was a learning curve. But over time, more volunteers came and some left. And the most we had at one time, if I remember right, was 7 or 8.
Mhm.
Probably, yeah, 7 or 8 plus myself.
Mhm.
And there were many times where volunteers would cancel last minute. So then I would scramble to change my plans and hustle down to the hospital, because I didn't want a shift to go empty if at all possible. But there were times, especially on a Saturday, where volunteers would have something else would come up, and I'd go running down to the hospital. So there, with any volunteer program, you're going to have some hiccups, you're going to have some learning curves, you're going to have unexpected events come up. But what that experience did for me was it catapulted my Reiki journey so fast and so much farther than it would have occurred just in a private practice, because of the way it developed my relationship with Reiki and the rapid fire experiences that I gained in that setting. Just
Yeah.
imagine walking into a critically ill patient's room, not knowing anything about them, and laying hands on them and they feel better. Which reminds me of another piece of this too. Just the mind-boggling concept that one little person with no medical background could go to a bureaucracy of over 4,000 employees and volunteers, convince them to allow strangers to go into critically ill patients' rooms, lay hands on them, and that they would feel better.
Yeah.
I didn't
That's
do
pretty
this.
amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't me. This was divinely orchestrated and completely managed. I just showed up with a loving, willing heart to serve and learned as I went.
Well,
And
that's pretty amazing. And about this time, I guess I would like to check with any of our listeners if any of you have any questions for Jennifer. I mean, she's sharing a wealth of information about how she started this program, and I applaud your bravery and courage and following your guidance so strongly.
I have lots of stories I could tell.
Yeah. So anybody have any questions so far?
Oh, this is Evelyn. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. Did you train nurses so they can do Reiki themselves to their patients? No. Okay.
But that would be a great thing to
That's
do
a good thing.
also.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, others have done that. I know one of our other licensed teachers, Tracy Sullivan, spent time training nurses at a Yale Hospital in New Haven, Connecticut. Okay. Well, Jennifer, you want to tell us another story? Let's see, we've got about 15 minutes left.
So I can only share a few stories. So one of the things, oh gosh, there's so many good stories. I had a lot of opportunities to work with end-of-life patients, patients who were on what was called comfort care. Nothing more could be done for them. Their life was coming to an end, their physical life, so they were just being kept comfortable. And I learned that I love working with end-of-life patients. I feel like it's being a birthing doula for the soul to be rebirthed back into the heavens. And I had such amazing experiences assisting people. Not that they passed as I was there, but it became a point to where the charge nurse, if there was a patient lingering, that on days that I wasn't even there or no volunteers were scheduled, that she would check with me to see if there was any chance that I might be able to stop by and assist. And I I told the class this weekend, and John was in that class, of the first time this occurred, and it was early in the program. And the volunteer who was with me is the one I met when I did my Karuna Reiki masterclass. And we arrived at the hospital, and the nurses had been watching for us, asked us to go into this room of an end-of-life patient who had been non-communicative for quite some time, meaning, he wasn't conscious anymore.
Mhm.
And we walk into this room, and it was shoulder to shoulder packed with family members who had traveled from all over the country to come and say their goodbyes. But dang, their loved one was still hanging on, and they were tired. The energy in the room was dense and heavy. And so the other Reiki volunteer, she started offering Reiki to family members. Some accepted, some not. And I went to work on the patient, starting with putting my hand on his head and hand on his chest. And by that point, I had learned a lot about what holds a soul back as I was trying to help my grandmother finish her physical life. So I knew that a lot of times people are stuck and don't leave when their body is done because they have regrets and the woulda, shoulda, couldas. So I start giving Reiki, connected with him on a soul level, and started talking to him about things such as he had done the best he could with the skills he had at that time, that he was loved, that his family loves him and they're going to be fine. And then it was as if a portal opened, and not with my physical eyes, but with, maybe it was the eyes of my soul. I was able to see this light open up. And there were people that I sensed were family members that had gone on before him, and there were angels there. And I was able to talk to the patient on a soul level about, see, you've got family members waiting to help you move on and go back home, and there are angels to help you. And of course, during this whole process, I was also monitoring what was going on in the room and periodically opening my eyes and seeing who was receiving Reiki and how far the other volunteer was getting through all of the family members who were interested. Not all received. And there was this one little girl, all adults, multiple generations, but there was this little girl who was about 6 years old. And every time I looked over, she was staring at me. I really felt like she could see something that the rest of us couldn't see. And then when we were done and we're saying our goodbyes, the little girl grabbed me by the arm and pulled me down, locking eyes, and asked, "Can you teach me that? Can you teach me how to do that?" And then just had a brief conversation with her and her mom. They were from Minnesota or somewhere around there. And then we left. Whoa, that was very powerful. Both the other volunteer and I needed to go together to another room, into a bathroom, and just decompress a little bit, download what we just experienced. And then we went back out in the hall as all the family members were walking out, and they were laughing and joking and telling us they were on their way to the motel to go swimming. And again, we were just, wow, what just happened? It was beautiful. And that opened the way for so many more opportunities to assist souls to move forward. And I know we're running out of time, but there is at least a little bit more I'd like to tell you about an experience that only happened when I was working alone and there weren't any family members in the room. And the first time this occurred, it was with a patient that had, in order to go into the room, anybody going into the room had to put on gloves, a plastic gown, mask, and face guard. I assume she had MRSA, and which is very communicative. And I never asked my volunteers to do that. I felt protected and I went in. And this was a woman. She was sitting in her bed. I do the same thing, hand on the head, hand in the heart, and you do a little coaching of breathing and get her started. And I'm dripping in sweat because Reiki's flowing like crazy and I'm wrapped in plastic. Having waterfalls front and back. And periodically I open my eyes, as I always do, to monitor facial expressions and breathing and heart rate. And this time, I just opened my eyes when she jerked her eyes open and sat up a bit, looked me in the eye and said, "I'm not afraid to die anymore. I just saw Jesus." No, I take it back. She said, no, that's what she said. Yeah. "I'm not afraid to die anymore. I just saw Jesus." It took all of my strength to maintain my composure. I got through the rest of the shift. When I got home, I mean, I literally dropped to my knees in humble gratitude for being able to witness something like that. And that same thing, without the plastic, occurred on several occasions, but only when I was alone with the patient. And I know we're running out of time. I haven't gotten to tell you at all about the surgical unit or the
We
day
still have
when
10 minutes. Keep
Okay.
going.
Well,
Keep going. You are an excellent storyteller.
well, these are incredible stories. And mostly they were kind of buried until you asked me to do this. And then they've been popping up there. I could go on for a long time. But this one day, I show up to the oncology department. I'm alone. And I have a long list of patients, way too many to cover in 2 or 2.5 hours. But the Reiki angels were right there. I would go into a patient's room, a matter of minutes. The room was filled with Reiki angels, and I would leave the patient alone with the angels. They'd immediately go to sleep. there were times in some of the rooms, there was the spouse there. And so I'd have the spouse come over, I'd lay hands on both of them, and bang, they'd be out of sleep, way deep into sleep. And I'd get up and I'd leave. And in a span of 2.5 hours, I treated 18 people.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes, it was. It was just an incredible experience. And it so developed my trust and my faith in Reiki and allowing it to guide me when I have no idea what to do or what to say. I've learned not to have to plan every detail, just be open and let it occur. And with the last few minutes, I want to tell you a bit about in the surgical unit. So a couple of years into the program in the oncology department, I was kind of feeling like, all right, I've kind of learned about all I'm going to learn here. I want to expand. And word had gotten around the hospital that it was really a successful program and patients were benefiting. And for whatever reason, it was the surgery unit that I really wanted to move into. And so we started that, made the introductions. It went really, really quickly because the nurse manager had already heard about the successes and she wanted to be part of that. But I had learned from my experience in the oncology department and the difficulty of getting the nurses on board. So I did it differently when I introduced it to the nurses in the surgical unit, the prep recovery area. And, before patients went into surgery and PACU, post-anesthesia care unit, the recovery room. So we set up many different meetings for nurses to be able to come and receive Reiki in 2 different rooms. There'd be a volunteer with me, and we'd each take a room, and the nurses would lay on a gurney, and we'd have music playing. So we went in with them having experienced Reiki to some degree. So that helped a lot. Okay, I'm going to try to talk as fast as I can because I had some really awesome, amazing, cool experiences there where somebody without medical experience should not have been allowed in. If anybody had supervised or monitored, the program was so successful, nobody monitored what I did. And so it didn't take too long in the pre-surgery area for some nurses, a core group who really saw the benefit and made sure their patients received Reiki on the times that we were there. And some anesthesiologists also saw the benefit because their patients that had received Reiki were needing fewer drugs. So I actually, on numerous occasions, was invited in to the patient's room when the family had to leave during nerve blocks. That's a very technical process. And so I would give the patients Reiki as very long needles were inserted into them with cameras on the end and watch it on a ultrasound screen. And it was so much easier for those patients because one, they're distracted. I'm talking with them, I'm calming them with my voice, and I'm laying hands on them and giving them Reiki. I mean, those needles to me look like this big, and I'm not really exaggerating. I'm going into the neck or into the shoulder or into the back and for knee.
And you had to overcome your gag thing.
Oh, by that point, I was fine. There was only one situation where I did have trouble with that, and that was in the oncology department. I don't think we have time for that. But also was able to go into PACU, post anesthesia care unit, and give patients Reiki in that situation. Those were specific patients. One was actually some of them, one of them was the nurse manager for the PACU unit when she had her knee replaced. Another one was a hospital administrator when she had bilateral, both hip replacements at the same time, and another nurse manager, and then one who was one of our Reiki volunteers. But in PACU, when they're trying to wake the patient up, it's a completely different type of Reiki. It's not calm and soothing. It's, come on, let's get going. And there were times where the nurse would be busy because they're working on multiple patients. And so they'd ask me, can you help with giving ice chips? So, do things like that and be giving Reiki in a stimulating way to get them to come back and engaging them in conversation, getting them cognitive so that they could then move out of the PACU unit.
Mhm. Wow. So
Coming up with
Reiki to wake them up.
Reiki to wake them up.
Like what did she do? Like, eh.
No, I didn't have to do anything. It was the intention. This was the need. I don't even know if it was my intention, but it was the need. And Reiki took care of it. My part was to show up with a loving, willing heart to serve. And I simply would talk with them as I gave them Reiki, trying to engage their cognitive brain.
Mhm.
Talking to them about whatever I could think of to ask them questions about.
Uh-huh. Wow. Wonderful. Well, amazing how you just allowed yourself to be so guided by that. And I can imagine the amount of trust, and faith that helped to generate in you, in your connection with the divine, your connection with Reiki. And I guess we'll need to bring it to a close, but wow, the incredible difference that you made to so many people, patients and staff alike at the hospital. All I can say is thank you for your service to so many people. And then, since then you've written about it and, you've, done other things to promote it. So, that's amazing, but it just shows that anybody with a willing heart, as you said, could start a hospital program. And can you give us some resources, that
I
they can
want
use?
to emphasize on that. So timeline. I first had my Reiki training, Usui Reiki, from a not very professional teacher in January 2013. I started teaching in January of 15. The Reiki Hospital Oncology program started 2 years later, January 16.
Mhm.
That's how fast Reiki can move you
Wow. Well,
for
amazing.
everything else that you're doing in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is the Center for Reiki Research.org that William Rand started, and that research that was done a number of years ago showed that about 15% of the hospitals in the US had Reiki programs. That was back in 2012. I don't know if they've updated it since then. Do you know about that, Jennifer?
No, I don't. I haven't been involved in that.
Okay. All right. Well, that is a resource for you. They created a booklet that had information on a lot of different hospital programs because some of them were designed, slightly different from each other. So that if you're interested, you can go check out the website. And I don't know if they still have that booklet or if it's, they just have that information somewhere on the website. I would assume somewhere on the website. So that's a resource. Are there any other resources that you can think of for people, Jennifer?
No, not as far as going online.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of spending time faithfully in daily self Reiki, asking for guidance, developing your relationship with the energy, and allowing it to guide you to where to go.
Yes, because each of us has our own unique path about how we're going to use Reiki and how it will work in our lives. So all we got to do is tune in and listen. Awesome. Well, any last thing that you want to share before we end, Jennifer?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share these stories with you.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your beauty and your heart and these stories. Yeah, I'm sure we could easily sit here and listen to another hour worth of stories. Oh, George, yeah. What are you saying? You have a question? Oh, you're muted.
I found this absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Um, I am an Uber driver. I found out this morning that a longtime rider of mine has a cancer, a rare cancer, and so this just sort of ties right into the power of what this thing can do and how it can lead you into certain things. And so, yeah, it's just very fascinating. Thank you so very much. I could listen to her all day.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Well,
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to relive some of these incredible miracles I was able to participate in.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Much love to you and love to everybody else. Love and healing. And we look forward to connecting with you again. Next, we have Reiki Circle in person on the fourth Monday of the month in Kansas City. And we have our online Reiki share on the second Monday of the month. So my website again is KarenHarrison.net and Jennifer's is ReikiTheHolyGift.com. So thank you all for joining us. Good night.
Everybody.